everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 153. As always, if you are enjoying the show, there are multiple ways to support me in this work. Please follow the podcast, rate the podcast. Even if you're watching on Facebook, that really helps. You can also share this with a friend, tell somebody about Wind Down Wednesdays, and you can donate directly to me to help support the show. There are links in the podcast notes, or you can go to paulataylorenergy.com, go to the podcast page, and there's a link to donate through PayPal. So today's topic is a really good one. It's a very practical, useful topic. Sometimes we get in these kind of really esoteric, abstract topics and it might feel difficult to connect with. This is really going to help you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about where this came from and how it's been helping me as I most often do. But stick with this, and this meditation is really going to be one you're going to want to come back to because this is a life-changing practice. So today we're going to be talking about embodiment and decision making. And just kind of a note, because we did quite a few shows, kind of a series on embodiment, and then we shifted a little bit and we've been talking about shame. And I want you to know that those things are very closely connected. The more embodied we get, the more we come back into our body, or maybe come into our body more like for the first time as adults or with awareness, the deeper we kind of get in exploring our emotions. And shame is an emotion that's really buried underneath a lot of other emotions. So as you begin to embody, as you come back into your body, it's part of this awakening process, this embodiment process, to start uncovering shame. But we're going back a little bit to focus on embodiment because this is something that I've been doing in my life that's made a huge difference, and I wanted to share it with you. So just briefly, you don't have to have watched all the embodiment shows or listened to them. Let's just do a quick, what is embodiment? And then we're going to talk a little bit about how embodiment can help you with decision making. So embodiment, my definition of embodiment is essentially being energetically present in your body, having awareness of your body, having what we call interoception, which means an internal awareness of your body. I think a lot of us, especially people with a trauma history, but pretty much everyone in our society, because we're so mentally focused, most of us are kind of not in the body. We're sort of just in the head space and we're disconnected from our body. And the psychological term for that is dissociation. I think for a lot of us, we're chronically kind of mildly dissociated to the point that we don't even recognize that we're not connected to the body. And I see this a lot when I work with people. I'm going to guide you a little bit in some interoceptive awareness today in our meditation to kind of get to the sacral space. And what happens a lot of times when I ask people, especially when we get to the belly, the solar plexus and the sacral chakras, there's just no awareness. How do you feel in there? Oh, I don't know. Or it feels like I feel emptiness, or it feels like a big hole, or it's a big black space or a cave. That is very common, and that is a good sign of this sort of disconnection, not really knowing how you feel, not being connected to your body. And there's so many reasons this happens to us, and we talk about this a lot. I'm not going to go into the details. You can go back and watch the shows on trauma, the shows on embodiment, or listen to them. There's so many things that do this to us. So what we're going to do, we're just going to start with an assumption that most of us are not fully embodied. And there might be a few exceptions to that, but even those of us who do this work, I do this for a living, I am still working on really getting embodied. And that's kind of where this topic came from, where all of this series of shows has come from. Usually comes from my own experience and experiences with clients. And what I find is that a lot of us are working on the same things at the same time. There's this like collective work that we're doing, and that's not an accident. I think we all sort of embody at the same time in history because there's things karmically that we want to work on, that we want to kind of change. And so there are sort of overall patterns in what we're dealing with, even though your experience is individual. And I always tell you, you may not relate specifically to the examples I'm giving, but there's usually a theme underneath there that kind of is fairly universal. So what's been happening for me over the last 6 weeks or so, and I've mentioned this on the show before, I've been participating in this program with my friend Barbara Collier here in Tucson. It's called EASE, equine assisted somatic experiencing, and her program is called Equanimity, so you can check that out. I'll try to remember to put a link in the podcast notes. Fantastic program, has really been life-changing for me. And again, I do this for a living, so it's just really powerful work, and especially if you have a history of trauma. So through this work with horses, we've been kind of exploring coming back into the body and being energetically present, having awareness, having interoception. And one of the things I'll mention that I've talked about on the show a lot, but just as a little bit of history, I have probably about a 30-year history of having an eating disorder, kind of all over the map, not eating, eating too much, eating and starving, and kind of going back and forth. And over the last few years, I've been trying to work through that and release that, which has been quite a monumental task. And again, you go back and listen to the show. It's kind of like there's my journey as a parent in the show. But one of the things that having an eating disorder does, just like having trauma does, just like being in your mind space all day in your job or whatever, is that it really disconnects you to your body. And eating disorders are even more complex because my view of my body has always been objective. Your body is completely objectified. And this is not just an eating disorder experience. I mean, this is a modern society experience. And especially, I would say especially for women, but I think it's true for men too. And we've sort of done a disservice because they have a different kind of pressure. But essentially, there's this pressure to look a certain way. There's this pressure to even eat a certain way, be healthy. There's this wellness, almost like cult. I was going to say culture. It's almost like a cult of, different types of diet and lifestyle. We've become sort of obsessed with this, but there's still this objectification about it. It's not necessarily about how you feel on the inside. It's still a lot more about how you look on the outside or the appearance of being healthy. There's actually a new eating disorder, or newer, I think it's called orthorexia, and it's basically like being obsessed with health to the point that you're unhealthy because you're so afraid to eat carbs that you actually have nutritional deficiencies, things like that. You're over exercising to the point where you're getting stress fractures. Like those would be some examples of that. So again, your experience may not be mine. This is a fairly specific experience. However, I think all of us have this experience of being disconnected from our bodies and kind of objectifying our bodies and not necessarily having this internal awareness of what's going on in our bodies. And the interesting thing that I've noticed just over the years, but especially doing this work, I'm going to talk a little more about that, is that it gets worse and we get more disconnected the further down we go in our bodies. So most of us, like if I ask you, we did this a few weeks ago, but just quickly, like if I ask you, how does your head feel? You probably have it feels okay, which is not a feeling, by the way, but like, it's a little tight, or I have a little bit of a headache, or, there's a lot on my mind. Like you'd have an answer for that. If I ask you about your heart and your throat area, probably same thing. Even like upper belly, maybe some, I'm feeling my tummy's a little upset for something I ate earlier. I'm feeling a little hungry. Like those are interoceptive cues. But the lower down we go in the body, like if I ask you, how do you feel in your pelvis? Maybe unless you have to go to the bathroom, you're like, I don't know. If I ask you, like, how do you feel in your knees? Unless your knees are hurting, a lot of times the only interoceptive cues we pay attention to are pain. And that is one of the reasons that pain is actually a good sign that you need to kind of do some work. You need to do some emotional work because we get littler cues. We get these small cues, and then the body will start to kind of slap us across the face to really get our attention. And a good example of that is hunger. I get hangry. So sometimes like I don't even feel hungry and I'm working, I'm doing my stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, I will murder you. Give me the food right now. And that is, there's some physiological stuff there. We don't need to go into that. That is a good example of there were little cues all along that I was probably a little bit hungry. And I'm so used to ignoring those, especially with my history of not eating, that it gets to the point where it's like screaming for attention. And that is what a pain is a lot of times. So if I ask you to scan through your body and you're only noticing the areas that are like uncomfortable or feel painful, that's actually a good sign that you need to work on your interoception. You might say like, well, yeah, I'm aware of my knees because they hurt. But like, what about everywhere between, let's say your like neck and your knees hurt. What about everything in between there? How does that really feel? We're going to get into that a little bit with this interoceptive work. But one of the things I want to talk about and kind of where this came from and where we're going today is this idea. Barbara introduced this idea of having three brains. So we have the brain in our head, we have a brain in our heart, and we have the brain in our gut. And all of these areas actually have like brain cells, essentially. They have neurological cells. This has been studied, and we're not going to go down that road. We're just going to accept that. We've got a brain in our head, we've got a brain in our heart, we've got a brain in our gut. And one of the things doing this equine work that I've realized is that I can't really trust the brain in my heart. And that was like a big awareness for me. So we've talked a lot on the show about how your ego sort of lives in the mind, in the brain space, and your ego has a tendency to lie to you and kind of be fear-based. And it's because it wants to protect you. It's trying to serve you. But at a certain point, things that used to serve you maybe don't anymore. And so that's where we get things like limiting beliefs and the things that we need to overcome. So one of the things I've said on the show for in past episodes is this idea that like the body doesn't lie. And there in trauma now we know there's, ideas of like the body keeps score and the body remembers and things like that. So I think I assumed that my heart space was kind of part of my body. I mean, it is. Your brain is also part of your body. And in spiritual teachings and spiritual communities, we are often, the heart space is really venerated. I mean, almost to a fault. It's important, absolutely. And, live from your heart and be in your heart and follow your heart. But one of the things I've become aware of is that, and again, this is specific to me, but I don't think so. I think this is fairly universal, and this might be, you might experience this in a different way. One of the places we get most activated emotionally in the body is the chest, is the heart space. And if you think about being nervous, or you think about being upset, or you think about being angry, there's a gut component to that for most people, but a lot of times it's like a chest component too. And so we were doing an exercise where we were kind of practicing asking for something that we wanted or asking for something that we needed in like a really very simple way. And during this exercise, I realized I was getting really activated. So when I was asking, like what, we were holding a rope and it was like, do you want to change this? Do you want the rope to be tighter? Do you want it to be looser? Like, what do you want with the rope? I was so kind of nervous or activated or uncomfortable about asking that when I checked in with my heart space, with that, my second brain, it was just like really tight and uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, I don't want anything. It's okay. Oh no, it's all right. I won't ask. That is actually trauma. So be aware that this idea of being in your heart space and like, yes, it's great, but also just like everywhere else in the body, we hold trauma in the chest, in the heart space, especially. So I've been trying to make decisions from my heart space, and I think getting really confused because a lot of times I don't know from my heart space if something is a yes or no, because there's an activation there. There's fear around that. Do I want to do this or do I not? And sometimes it's like, the fear is like stepping outside of your comfort zone, and it's a little bit of a good stretch. And sometimes it's like in that exercise, I'm feeling really activated and I don't even know what I want because I can't find it, because there's this kind of bouncing energy or like anxiety in the chest, this sort of trauma activation or triggering, as we've talked about on the show. So through this process, one of the things that I've been doing again is like really coming down into my belly, especially into the legs and feet more. And during this exercise, and I'd already been kind of practicing this, and this is one of those examples of how like you start doing something and then something else happens, and then pretty soon there's this sort of like cascade, and it's like, oh, and you have an epiphany. So I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with this rope, and I couldn't because I was too triggered. I was too activated. And it was like, all of this trauma around like asking for what I want, and what if the other person is uncomfortable, and what if it's too much, and what if they think I'm stupid? Because it turned out when I checked in down in my gut brain, in that intuitive space that we've talked about, the womb space or womb, the hara, the lower dantian. We did a whole show with the meditation on the lower dantian. This is a huge power house of energy, but it's also the source of that gut brain, this idea of like a gut instinct or a gut intuition or trust your gut feeling, things like that. It comes straight from the body, I think. The further down we are, the further into the body we are, the further connected to the earth we are, and the more we can trust that information. And I think that's where those kind of sayings come from. So I was in this exercise and I was like, I don't know what I want. And I definitely don't want it tighter. Like I knew that, but I was like, I don't even know what my other choices are. Bleh. And I was kind of freaking out and my brain was going a little bit crazy and my heart space was going a little bit crazy. And then I dropped into my body. That was one of the things that we were being kind of led to do in this exercise, was like really come into your body and really kind of feel connected to the earth and the ground and kind of come into your own space and not worry so much about what the other person might want or think or whatever. And when I dropped down into that space, I realized I wanted some rhythm in the rope. I wanted some movement, like rhythmic movement. And afterwards I was like, oh, well, I'm a sound person. That like makes total sense to me, that I would be soothed by like a little bit of rhythmic movement. And when I dropped down there, then right away it was like, oh, I'd actually like a little bit of movement, like a little bit of rhythmic movement. And so the other person kind of started doing it. And then I was like, that's a little bit fast. Let's slow it down. And it was like, boom. As soon as I got all the way down into that sacral space, I knew what I wanted. I wasn't afraid to ask for it. And I knew exactly what I wanted. It wasn't just rhythm. There was a specific sort of pace of rhythm that I wanted. And I had to get out of the mind, brain number one, and the heart, brain number two, because the activation up here was preventing me from really knowing what I wanted on like a deep body, intuitive gut level. So one of the things I had been doing leading up to this that I think helped me come to that kind of epiphany, that I can't always trust my heart space because there's still trauma there. There's still activation there. That is where I feel emotion. Some people feel emotion more, especially in the upper belly. But the lower belly, that's another thing. I have a history of bowel problems. And I think that's one of those things where the body's trying to get your attention and you're not listening, you're not paying attention necessarily. And so then it has to act out essentially to really get you to pay attention. And it's not always, it's a bowel thing, but it's not always about the bowel. It's people who have things like IBS, emotional things tend to trigger whatever the flare up looks like for you. It's different for different people. So one of the things that I've been doing kind of adjacent to this that helped me come to this realization, I'm going to tell you about because I want to get into the meditation, but this is directly where this meditation came from. So I've been seeing a holistic doctor for a while now to kind of work on my bowel issues. I had a massive surgery and my bowel flare up kind of got worse. And it was like, I can't keep living like this. It was really interfering with my life. And so I've been seeing this holistic doctor and he gives me different supplements to take, like minerals and not really herbs, like minerals and vitamins and things like enzymes, things like that. And he does kind of medical intuitive work. So he like intuitively kind of has a feel for maybe what my body needs. And so initially for the first several months I was seeing him, I was just taking everything as directed. And I had a couple of reactions to things, not anything bad, but just like, I've had a lot of heartburn, like, oh yeah, that could have been this. Like, oh, I've had a headache. Yeah, that could have been this. And not really because of I am the way I am. I didn't necessarily reach out and say like, hey, I'm having these symptoms. I'm not sure what's going on. Can you help me? I did at some point. So all of a sudden it occurred to me that I could just ask my body on a given day what it really needs, because everything changes, right? We fluctuate. Our hormones change. Our nutritional needs kind of change. Sometimes we need maybe more heavy food or grounding. Sometimes we need lighter stuff. Sometimes we need more rest. Our bodies, in order to maintain balance or homeostasis, things are kind of always moving and shifting a little bit. So what I started doing was actually picking up the supplements and then feeling into my low belly, into that sacral space, and learning and I had an idea, what does my intuitive yes and my intuitive no feel like from this really deep space? Because again, I've been doing that from my heart space, but realizing that my heart space actually sometimes kind of tricks me because there's some emotion involved, there's some trauma involved. So when I get really down deep in my belly and I pick up one of these supplements and I'm quiet for a moment and I focus, I feel a shift. I feel an expansion, and that feels like a yes to me, or I feel contraction. And sometimes I can actually physically feel the muscles of my low belly kind of contracting, and that feels like a no to me. So one of the things we're going to do in today's meditation, I'm going to guide you down into that space, which is going to take a little bit, and you may have to repeat this. Probably you will have to repeat this multiple times, even to maybe just really get there. And then we're going to check in a little bit about like, what does an intuitive yes feel like and what does an intuitive no feel like? And I've seen people do this. I think they call it sacral calibration. And the way I've always seen it done is like somebody does these rapid fire questions, like you're in a lie detector test or something. And I find that to be very activating. I need time. And it's interesting. I've been doing this for a while now. I've been expanding it to kind of food choices. And some of the things I've noticed, like the other night I was holding my supplement and I was getting a no, but I realized I was actually in a conversation with my husband that was like kind of not feeling good to me. And so I had to say, let's hold on just a minute. Let me finish what I'm doing. I really need to focus. And when I kind of cleared my energy and I refocused on the supplement alone, I actually got a yes. So one of the things that's really important about doing this is practicing it. I mean, practicing is always important, but the more you practice, the better you get. And we need to practice in a really controlled environment, like me standing alone in silence with my one supplement bottle. I'm really focusing. So now sometimes what I do, like I'm going to have lunch and there's like two things and I'm not sure, I'm not getting a strong like yes or no on either one. And especially because I've got bowel stuff. So sometimes I'll hold the one thing and then I'll hold the other thing and I'll see, do I get an expansion on one? Do I get a contraction on one? And then listening to that, because that's another thing. We are trained to ignore our bodies, to ignore, exercise, even if you don't feel good. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, if you don't feel good, probably you need rest. Like, it doesn't mean you're never going to exercise again. And it doesn't mean that, like, sometimes you don't have to overcome a little bit of, like, malaise or lack of motivation to kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone. There is nuance in here, but you can't find the nuance if you're so used to just saying no to yourself and ignoring your own needs and your own desires. And that's the thing about the sacral chakra. It is really linked to our desires. What do you really want? So when I've seen people do this before, a lot of times they ask, kind of yes or no questions that are, are you a woman? Are you a man? Do you have brown hair? Do you have blonde hair? I don't find that works at all for me, because this is really about desire. And sometimes it is about bodily desire. Like if I eat this thing with a lot of cheese, maybe it's not going to agree with me, so I'm going to get a no. Sometimes it's really about pleasure. What do I really want? I went out to lunch with my mom yesterday, and there were 3 things on the menu that looked good. And so I kind of centered myself. It was very loud, and that was it was a good example of like trying to do this in a space where there's like a lot of other energy coming in. And I just put my finger on each thing on the menu. And it took me a few minutes to get some clarity. Because at first, again, I think I was a little bit activated and triggered just by being in the space. I had to really find my center and kind of come all the way down into that lower belly. And then I got a pretty clear idea of what I wanted, what my yes was. And that's an interesting thing. Like all 3 of these things sounded good to me. They looked good to me. So I was like, oh, well, body, what would you like? There's a really loving compassion about this, about finally asking your body, what is it that you want? What is it that you desire? Because so often things are coming from the brain, the head, or the second brain, the heart, and we're not really listening to the body. So all 3 of these things sounded good to my brain. They all sounded like they would be tasty. So I was like, oh, body, which one do you want? And it's interesting because it was kind of steering me away from meat is how I felt. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it steers me toward meat. And I think that's another thing we've really done ourselves a disservice by. We do a lot of all or nothing thinking and action in our lives. I'm going to give up gluten and never eat it again. And some people have celiac disease and they have to do that. But I think sometimes, like I have an issue with lactose, and I take lactate, I take like lactose enzyme to help digest. But even with that, sometimes my body just like does not want dairy. And that doesn't mean I can never have dairy again. That's the thing that's been really liberating from an intuitive eating perspective for me, and again, I'm using food because everybody's got to eat, and it's a good way to practice this. Like some days my body doesn't want cheese, and that's okay. That doesn't mean I don't have to ever eat cheese again. Like then maybe the next day or 2 days later, my body is like, yeah, have some cheese. So this all or nothing stuff, unless you have a true, kind of allergy or an intolerance or something like that, it's really coming from this judgmental space, from this mind space. And so exploring this intuitive yes and no, it really starts, first of all, it's a great way to embody, because you got to really get into the body and really listen and really pay attention to this yes and no. And your yes might be different than mine. For me, I feel like an expansion kind of in my belly and sometimes even in my whole body. And I feel like a physical contraction of the muscles. Some people, for you, it might be like a sense of kind of coming up as your yes and coming down as your no. And essentially what we're looking for is like, the yes feels like something that's pleasurable. Like to me, this expansion feels pleasurable and the contraction feels kind of tight. So it might not present exactly that way for you. We're going to explore that a little bit. What is your yes? What is your no? And then I'm just going to ask some simple things about preference, things you like. I like coffee. I like tea. I like water. And it won't all be food related. I like dogs. I like cats. I like horses. Just really simple stuff to start to just kind of tune you in. And I'm going to try to leave some space in between these things. Because again, the way I've seen them, it's like somebody's like just rapid fire questions. And like my neurodivergence is already like, well, yeah, I'm still thinking about the first one. So like, that's the other thing, is that anytime you're doing intuitive work and coming back, the body has a slow, it's one of the things I've learned from the horses. They don't care if you're in a hurry. They're not going to move until they want to move, or until you've really until you've arrived at an understanding with them. They don't follow this like weird mental clock that we've made. Neither does your body. I mean, you may have trained your body, I get up at this time, I go to bed at this time, I do this, you have like a schedule. That's something that we are kind of forcing on our bodies. One of the things I always see about sleep is that many years ago, people weren't expected to sleep through the night. They would sort of sleep for a few hours and get up and like do some things and then sleep. But like, if you've got to get up at 6 every day and you got to do the thing, like, you got to fit your sleep in somewhere. So there's a lot of nuance to this. It might feel really uncomfortable. You might have a hard time connecting. Like, just go easy on yourself. Come back to this. Start to practice it, and start with something really small. Start with something really small. And that's why, like, food, everybody's got to eat. And a lot of times there's a lot of choices around food. And that's why it's a simple one, to kind of figure out, like, and this is a little bit like working with a toddler. So don't give yourself like 10 choices. Give yourself 2. Am I going to have coffee today, or am I going to have tea? And it really helps the body to physically contact the object. That's why I hold my supplements in my hand. Now, as you get better at this, then you may not need to do that. You may be able to just focus on it. And then you may start to expand, like, should I take this vacation? Should I go here or should I go here? Should I quit my job? And the more complex the issue is, the more like these upper 2 brains have a tendency to get really scattered. And, you think, oh, well, but if I quit my job, then where am I going to get money? And what's going to happen here? And then blah, 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 blah. And then you've got all this mental stuff. And it's scary, oh, maybe I'm going to disappoint someone and I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. When you come down into the belly and you feel, you're going to feel this intuitive yes or no. And now the other thing is, especially for something complex like that, you may not be ready to act on that, and that's okay. But at least you really know what the answer is. You really know that it's an intuitive yes or an intuitive no. It's an embodied yes or an embodied no. And you're not acting out of like a trauma trigger. You're not acting out of guilt. You're not acting out of shame. It's coming, the body, yes, the body holds shame. But when we really connect and we're honoring the body, that's a great way to counteract shame, and asking, what do you really want? Like, most of us, I'm guessing, have never really asked our bodies that. And if you have, you're doing great, and keep at it. And maybe this will still serve you to kind of, again, find some of this nuance. So let's meditate together. for this meditation, find a position that feels supportive and comfortable. You might find that sitting up kind of gives you a base of support for this low belly work that we're doing. You might find that you want to lie down, and that's fine. And you might find that you need to switch in the middle, and that's all right as well. So our goal today is to really get our awareness all the way down into the belly from the inside of our body. And that may be a bit of a journey. So we're going to start where we're most commonly energetically present in the head and work our way down. We do this a lot, but we're going to do this a little more slowly until we get now really down into the belly and really present. And then we're going to start kind of checking in with this intuitive yes and intuitive no from a place of full embodiment, really deep down in the belly. So let's start as we always do. Let's take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 deep oxytocin breaths. We're going to breathe in through the nose, really let that belly float out strongly. We're going to sigh that breath out through the mouth using an audible ha sound from high to low, just telling the body that it's safe, telling the body that you're giving it some space to relax, maybe setting the intention that you're really here to listen to and honor your body today. So a few nice deep oxytocin breaths. And after you've completed a few of those, you might notice already that you feel a little more present in your body. Maybe your mind slows down a little bit. Maybe you're more aware of your bottom on the seat or on the earth, of your back on the ground if you're lying down or on the bed. Maybe take 1 or 2 more of those, especially if you're feeling a lot of tension in your body. Just gently maybe do a little bit of motion, maybe shrug your shoulders once or twice, just very gently. This is not a stretch, we're just moving a little bit, just allowing any built up energy in the body to kind of move freely to release before we get fully into this meditation. You can do a little bit of shaking. You can keep the oxytocin breaths going here. You can just allow yourself to breathe naturally, but do periodically breathe out through the mouth because that really helps with release. As we kind of bring our awareness down into the body, we're going to encounter some resistance, some energy, some things that are ready to be released. And that nice breath out through the mouth is a really good way to do that. So just focusing now on your head, you can allow that crown chakra, the top of your head, to open. You can invite in a beautiful golden white love and light of source energy, of chi or ki or prana. And just from the inside of your head, just notice how your head feels. Just be in that space. Maybe take a couple breaths here. Invite that energy into your head. Just bringing your energy back into the head space, bringing your awareness there. A lot of times as we bring awareness on something, we'll notice like the slowing down of our thoughts, or we'll notice a settling physically in the body. And if that doesn't happen, that's fine too. You can repeat this as many times as you'd like, and eventually you will begin to notice those things. Bringing awareness now down into the throat, kind of the inside of the neck. Maybe just noticing if there's any tension or tightness, maybe taking a nice big deep breath, sighing it out. Settling through the throat here, coming down into the chest. Think about being in the very center of your body here, the center of your chest, where your lungs and your heart are. Maybe take a nice deep breath in, sigh it out. Just be present in this chest space. Maybe you feel a little bit of emotion or activation here. Maybe you just take a couple of extra deep breaths. You can add in that oxytocin breath, that ha sound. Just giving yourself a chance to release anything that's no longer serving. As we move down into the upper belly, this might be a little bit more difficult to access. You can actually put your hands on your belly. Sometimes that helps bring awareness. I'm actually lightly kind of rubbing my belly, just really lightly, helping my mind and my belly connect. And as you come into the upper belly, just notice how you feel. If you don't feel anything, that's okay. A lot of us don't explore from the inside of the belly much. And maybe the cues you're getting are things around food or hunger. Maybe you're feeling hungry or full. Maybe this just feels kind of like a dark, empty space. Just stay with it. Take a few breaths here. Sigh them out. Just being present in the upper part of the belly. Again, putting your hands there can really help. And really, again, come very deeply into the center of your physical belly. You might find that your awareness has been kind of hovering out toward the front of your body or even the outside. Really try to bring it inside the body. You might become more aware of your spine. You might actually feel the muscles respond. You might find yourself sitting up a little straighter, kind of activating your core. You might find yourself relaxing down and releasing and kind of slumping a little bit. Let go of any judgments and just come into this space, really deep into the center of this upper belly here. And again, maybe take a few breaths, just notice how it feels. And if there's anything that feels unresolved here, know that you can always come back. This is not the focus of today's meditation, so we're going to move down to the low belly, to the pelvis. But you can always come back and do some more exploration of any of these areas of the body. So as you bring your awareness into the pelvis, you might notice the pelvis feels a little bit like a bowl. That's actually how the shape of the pelvis, of the bones and the muscles, it kind of makes a bowl. So you might imagine that you're sort of settling at the bottom of this bowl. And just bring some awareness. We're gonna go ahead and bring some awareness to the root chakra, the lowest part of the body, and then come back. So from the bottom of the pelvis, just be aware of the bottom of your tailbone. Maybe put your hands on your legs if that's accessible, and just kind of slowly move your hands down towards your knee. Just bringing some awareness into the legs. You may have forgotten that you have legs, and that's completely fine. We're just bringing some awareness, just connecting to the earth before we come back to the sacral chakra, the pelvis, coming down into the legs, the thighs, the knees here. Sending your awareness down through the lower legs, through the shins and the calves and the ankles, all the way to the feet. If you're sitting with your feet on the floor, you can really get a good sense of the connection of your feet to the ground. You could even imagine the soles of your feet just opening a little bit, lingering with that beautiful earth energy. If you're lying or sitting with your legs out, or maybe you're cross-legged, just really bring that awareness to the very bottom of the pelvis now too. No matter what position you're in, feel that kind of open and connect to the earth. You might get a sense of heaviness. You might feel a little bit sleepy. You might start yawning. That's a good sign of release. Just coming present into this lower part of the pelvis here, where your bottom meets the chair or the floor, or if you're lying down, where your bottom meets the ground. Again, sitting up is probably going to give you the best kind of spatial awareness of this, but if that's not accessible or that's uncomfortable, that's fine. Take a few deep breaths in this low belly, breathing in through the nose, breathing out through the mouth, adding that audible ha sound if it feels good. And let your awareness kind of expand. Maybe you're just kind of aware of the base of your bottom on the chair. Bring it up a little bit. That's more of a root. We're coming up into this low belly, this sacral area, kind of just below the belly button, above the sex organs. Again, you might even put your hands there. Just adding a little bit of physical awareness to help with your energetic awareness. Just notice how it feels in here. Might have some sensations. You might feel your intestines kind of gurgling around. You might feel a little bit of cramping or discomfort. And again, it might just feel like a big black empty space. You might not have a sense of this, and that's okay. That's what this meditation is for. So take your time here. Start maybe at the front of the body. If you've got your hands on your belly, you're bringing some awareness to the front of the belly. Let your belly relax here. Let your belly relax here. Let your belly relax here. There's no need to hold it in. Really let that relax. No one's watching you. No one's judging your gut. Just relax your belly. And then again, as we did in the upper belly, try to bring your awareness sort of back further into the core of the body. So you're not just resting right at the skin. You're sort of deeper in the body here. You might become aware of your tailbone, the bottom of your spine. You might feel the muscles engage a little bit as you come in, and that's fine. But again, focus on relaxation. We want to be in a really beautiful neutral space in here before we start asking about our intuitive yes and no. And you may need to come back and do this a few times. I encourage you to do that. And each time you might find more connection with this space. You might find more nuance in your body's response when we check in here. But just give yourself one more moment, maybe a couple more deep breaths, really coming into the belly. You might feel the belly start to heat up. That's that energy, that's that connection, that awareness. If you don't, that's fine too. You might feel your hands start to heat up if they're on your belly. That's your natural kind of Reiki, universal life force energy beginning to flow through your hands. And you might not feel anything at all, and that's completely fine. There's no judgment here. Release any judgment. Again, knowing that you can come back and do this until you feel more connected with this space. That's the whole purpose of this. So from this space now, take at least one really nice big deep breath. Sigh it out. Add that ha sound if it feels good. Really sigh it out through your mouth, and then just come fully present as much as you can into this belly space. And let go of judgment around what comes here. I'm going to ask you to find your intuitive yes. So we're just going to say, body, show me my intuitive yes. And then just be silent and notice what happens. Body, what is my intuitive yes? You might feel a sense of relaxation, a sense of expansion. You might feel a sense of settling, like a nice heaviness that feels good. You might feel a buoyancy. This is a pleasurable feeling, this yes. So just wait for a moment and see what comes up. And again, you might need to come back and do this a few times, and there's no judgment there. Body, what is my intuitive yes? And really stay focused on this space in the belly. You might have sensation elsewhere in the body, but don't let your awareness stay there. Bring it back to the belly and really focus on the belly itself, this deep, low kind of pelvic area of the belly. And once more, just ask, body, what is my intuitive yes? How does that feel? Just know that you can come back to this at any time. If you didn't get a clear answer this time, that's okay. It may take a little while. There's no judgment in that. There's no rush in this. So take another nice deep cleansing breath in through the nose, sigh it out through the mouth. Let go of that question. Just come back to the body. We're kind of coming back to a neutral space here. Maybe you need a couple more breaths. Just settling in the pelvis again. And then we're going to ask our second question. Body, what is my intuitive no? And again, just notice. Notice what you feel. Body, show me my intuitive no. And what you're looking for here is something that feels like a no to you, maybe a little bit of a contraction. It's a little bit of, it's not pleasurable like the yes. It's not painful. It's not uncomfortable, or it might be just a slight discomfort. It's a sign that it's a no for you. Like, I feel a contraction in the deepest kind of muscles of my low belly. Maybe you feel kind of like a tightening. Maybe you feel a heaviness, not in a good way, like something's pushing down on you. Maybe you feel like you're shot up out of your belly, back into your head and chest space. All of these could be signs of your no. So again, let's just ask and leave some space here. Body, What is my intuitive no? What does that feel like? And again, you may have sensations elsewhere in your body, but really stay with the low belly. If your awareness wanders up or down somewhere else, just come back to the low belly. Body, what is my intuitive no? Show me my intuitive no. And again, knowing that you can come back here, just take a nice deep breath in, sigh it out, maybe take 2 or 3. Just coming back to a state of neutral here, kind of releasing those questions. And again, just be aware this might take a few times to kind of connect with. And the more you do this, the clearer your answers will start to be. The more your body will respond. Your body wants to work with you in this way, but this might be new to both of you. So be patient with yourself, be patient with your body, be patient with your mind, be patient with resistance and judgments and fear that come up. And again, just go back to that big deep breath as you need. We're going to go through a series of questions. And again, these are preference questions because this sacral chakra area, this is the pleasure center. This is the want center. This is the center of your desire. So connecting with this is really helping you figure out what you want. And sometimes because we're embodied, because we're connecting with our body, what your mind or even heart space say that they want might be different from what your body wants, because it's also connected with what your body needs. And ultimately, we are in a body here. So respecting what your body wants, respecting what your body needs, respecting what will bring your body pleasure will actually feed the rest of you. And it will make decisions simpler. Eventually, it might take a while to get there. So we're going to start with just some really simple questions, just being settled in your belly. And notice, I'm going to ask yes or no questions. You just notice if you get a yes or no. And be aware sometimes that you get what I think of as a neutral, like no response. Or it's somewhere in between, or you're getting like both. Like, oh, it's contracting and expanding. So maybe that means it doesn't matter. Maybe it means your body's not sure. Maybe it means you need to kind of take a minute and reset. Like all of these things can be true. So just be aware too that you might not get a clear yes or no. You might get sort of a maybe or a I'm not sure, and just sit with whatever comes through here. So I'm just going to say a series of phrases, and your body will kind of agree with them or disagree with them. Instead of doing questions, we're going to do it that way. So the first thing I'm going to say here, I like coffee. And just notice your response. And the interesting thing is that your brain may instantly say yes or no. Come back to the belly. See what the belly says. I like coffee. And again, just to honor that response, you can come back and do this again. Coming back to a neutral, that's important if we're doing multiple questions or multiple decisions. So let go of whatever your answer was. Take a deep breath, sigh it out. Come back to kind of a neutral. Maybe you shake a little bit to clear that energy. And we're going to state our next statement. I like tea. Just notice how that feels. I like tea. And from here, you can ask more nuanced questions. Let's say you got kind of an I'm not sure. That could also mean like, well, what kind of tea? Because there's lots of kinds of tea, just like coffee. So maybe, I like Earl Grey tea. And just kind of see what kind of a response you get. And again, maybe take a nice deep breath, sigh it out, just kind of clear that. We're going to go into a couple different statements here. I like to be outside. I like to be in crowds. Just noticing for each one of these here. I like to be with my family. I like to watch the sunset. I like to take a day off from work. I like to have time for rest. I like to go on vacation. I like to be very busy. I like to go out to dinner. I like to go to parties. I like to watch TV. I like to go to the movies. Just continuing to check in, coming back to a neutral if you need to. I like dogs. I like cats. I like babies. I like children. I like to be alone. I like to spend time with people. And then just coming back to neutral again, maybe taking a nice deep breath. Just once more, we're going to check in. Body, what is my intuitive yes? Show me my intuitive yes. Body, what is my intuitive no? Show me my intuitive no. And again, nice big deep breath. Maybe you're getting a sense of this now. Maybe you're feeling a little bit of flow. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space here, a little bit of silence for you to play with this a little bit. And it really helps to do things out loud or even physically hold something if you're trying to get a sense for if your body, maybe you're wondering if your body wants more water. So you hold a glass of water and just see if you get that no or that yes. Maybe you continue to add some statements like the ones I was stating. Maybe you jump right into kind of a decision, a bigger decision that you've been looking at in your life. Just leaving some space for that now. And again, release judgment, recognize this might take a little bit, but just leaving some space here for you to play around with this. Assisting with some Reiki. I arrive, I am present in my body, I listen to my body. I step into flow. I step into flow. Letting go of your statements now. Take a nice big deep breath, sigh it out through the mouth. Again, knowing that you can come back to this anytime. You can practice this, starting with what really simple statements or questions. And know that as you begin this process, you may need to be really focused. You may need to be in a quiet space, a space without a lot of distractions. And as you practice this, as you strengthen this muscle, then you may be able to use this in more complex situations, or in situations where there's other people around, or more feedback, or more kind of environmental stimuli. So just practice this. You can practice this alone while you're driving. Just make sure you keep your eyes open and you're paying attention to the road, but just checking in with your body. If you have a few minutes of downtime in your day, you're going to the bathroom, although that may not be the best time to check in with your low belly, depending on how things are going. But just find a few moments in your day to begin to practice this, and you will notice, first of all, that it connects you with your body more. You find it easier to drop down into this space of embodiment and connection and presence. And then you may notice too that the decisions start to come easier. And remember that this is not static. So maybe today your body says it likes coffee. Maybe tomorrow it says it does not. So continually checking in, even if you think you know the answer, can be really affirming, can be really surprising. It's a great practice to continue to check in and be aware that from one day to the next, that intuitive answer may actually change. As we grow, as we evolve, as our physical needs change and our emotional needs change, this is such a handy and powerful tool to connect with this embodiment, this decision making from a place of full embodiment, of full intuitive knowing, this gut awareness. Take one or two nice deep breaths as we begin to come back. Maybe you move your body. You're nice and present in your body, but maybe you feel like you'd like to stretch, move a little bit. Just be really gentle with this. You can release the deep breaths as that feels good. Just coming back, present, ready to move on with the rest of your day or evening. Sat Nam. The truth of your identity is that you are in this beautiful, magical physical body, and you deserve to be present there and connected to your deep intuitive knowing. Take another nice deep breath if you'd like. Maybe wiggle fingers and toes. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me. Have an embodied and intuitive rest of your week, and I will see you next time for Wind Down Wednesdays.